All right, so let's bring it back in. Let's talk about, this is my favorite part, fortify them. How do we really make stories better? I mentioned these are my two coaches. Dave on the right-hand side. He was my first coach up 3, 4, 5, 6 rungs of the ladder. He got me to level 5, and the World Championship is level 6. But he had never been to the World Championship, and he did this beautiful, brilliant thing, and I think it's just an important point for everyone. And I needed the reminder. He literally walked me across the room. So he had been my coach. I just won level 5. Mark Brown, the other gentleman, my coach, he happened to be speaking at that same convention. And he walked me over to Mark, stood me in front of Mark, and he said, I can't take you where I have not been. I can't take you where I have not been. Think about that. The challenges that you have, are the people you're going to for advice, have they overcome that challenge? That was big for me, and he handed me over to Mark. And 7 years earlier, before that moment, 7 years as a speaker, and 77 days earlier than that moment, I walked over to Mark. I was so excited. So he had showed me how to write out the first version of my speech. I was so pumped. I was so excited. This is the greatest speech I had ever written. I took his advice. I followed it to the T. I drove from Boston to New York to work with my coach, Mark. So we're in a little corporate office at Reader's Digest where he worked at the time. It's just me and my two coaches. And I walk up to Mark, and I swear, as I handed it to Mark, the greatest speech in the history of Toastmasters. I swear you could hear choirs of angels. La! Mark took the speech. Oh, Darren, we have some work to do. What? I did everything you told me to do. I wrote the greatest speech that I could write from the level I was at. But you don't know what you don't know. Next biggest lesson in my life: if you're not coachable, there is no cure. Now, if you're here at this conference, you're actually somewhat open. And I'm going to ask you to really be open and just consider these ideas, because they were life-changing for me, for what I do. So the greatest advice I got after the World Championship came from this guy, Michael Haig. Michael is a scriptwriter, consultant for all the big Hollywood stars. He has worked on scripts that you've seen. The movie Hitch was actually based on his teachings, and he's one of my coaches in my university. So I teach presenters, good presenters, how to become unforgettable. That's what I teach. Well, he's one of my coaches, and here's what he said to me that was the game changer. The goal of any story is to elicit emotion. What? The goal of any story is to elicit emotion. See, the emotion makes the memory peg, which gets it into the subconscious mind, which gets it to stick. They'll remember it. That was a game changer. I didn't have that when I created a story. I didn't have that as my goal. Consider that as your goal. So secret number 1, tap and transport. When you can tap into the audience's world. Now, when I say audience, I mean one-on-one conversation, small group, boardroom, whatever that is for you. But tap and transport. So when you tap into their world, they're going to be more open to want to hear the story. So we're setting up the listening. So if I say something to you, maybe sounds familiar, picture this. Stop right there. Whatever comes next, you kind of have to picture it. Your brain is wired that way, so why not use that idea? So picture this. You are speaking in the World Championship of Public Speaking. I didn't say I was. I said you were. The most powerful word that you and I have in conversations is the word you. The number 1 word in anybody's dictionary is their own name. Kevin, Rachel. The two Rachels. They're together. Thank God they don't look alike. But using that, getting people to picture this is big. So if I tap into your world and I say the word you, so the most powerful word is you or your. In my championship speech, if you ever dissected it, not that you would want to, but I say the word you or your 34 times. 34 times. That's 4 a minute. Because every time I say you, I'm reaching out to the audience and saying, this is how it applies to you. This means you. This means you. The brain is conditioned to want to hear that, and I have to answer if there's a question in my head, even if I think you're an idiot. I still have to answer, and there's a connection. So the word you or your is your most powerful tool if you're talking to more than one person. If you're talking to one person, it's their name. So tap and transport. If you can tap into the audience's world, can you remember the first time you had to give a presentation? They go to their brain and their world. Now, the story has relevance. So everyone stand up for a second. Everyone stand up. All right, so we're going to, I know it's after break. Hopefully the coffee will kick in soon. I'm going to ask you to repeat after me, call and response, but have fun with this. Give me some attitude and have fun with this, all right? Give me some attitude, like get the lead out. So what? So what? Who cares?
Who cares?
What's in it for me? It's all about me. All right, one more time, bigger. So what? Who cares? What's in it for me? It's all about me. That is what your audience is thinking. That's what your audience is thinking. Whether a one-on-one conversation or a small group or a boardroom or 100 people, that's what they're thinking. You may be seated. So if they're thinking, so what, who cares what's in it for me, if we tap and transport, we give relevance to the story we're about to say, to the story we're about to tell them. So if I ask you if you could remember a time when you had to give a speech, you go back in your memory banks, but now you're more connected, you're more open to the story. Does that make sense? Tap and transport. That's a big one. Just opening up the listening. Next one, VAKS, V-A-K-S. In all my bigger stories, my longer stories, I use this. Visual, give us a visual, give us an auditory, give us a kinesthetic, and give us a smell. We teach check the VAKS. Now we do this in 10 seconds or less. We're not writing a book here, but we're setting up the visual in the audience's mind. 10 seconds or fewer. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and smell. By the way, circle smell, or circle the S in VAKS. Smell is actually the most powerful. You want somebody to listen to your story, you give them a smell that will be associated with that kind of scene, and they're more likely to go with you and listen. So if you remember when I said, picture this, you're about to give the speech of your life. You're in the World Championship of Public Speaking. You walk out and you see, what did you see? 2,000 chairs. In the back of the room, what did you smell? Coffee. What did you feel in the air? Tension. And then what did you hear? My dad walked up to me and said, I can't find my seat. So in just 10 seconds, I set the scene. So raise your hand if you pictured that scene when I originally said. You're partway there. But most people tell stories. They don't set up the listening. That's where they miss out. VAKS, very simple. I say 3 or 4. Always use an S if you can. Always use an S, a smell. It takes us there. In one of my other stories, it was before a meeting, and my mentor, Dan, had brought me into a photocopy room. He said, hey, let's come check this. I want to have you help me check the photocopy of the schedule. I said, sure, no problem, the agenda. Okay, I get there, and if you were standing there in the photocopy room, you would have seen reams and reams of paper on the wall. You would have smelled the toner in the air, and you would have felt the warmth coming off the machine as it spit out the agenda. Okay, pause. For you, in your mind, the photocopy room, what color was the paint on the wall? Anyone? White. I didn't say, so you're not wrong, whatever it was. gray. Here is the magic of this. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But here's what matters. You pictured it. It doesn't matter what you pictured. It matters that you pictured. When you set up a story, if you can get the audience, the listener, one-on-one as well, to just picture the scene, they're going to go with you in the story. What happens in your brain is when I describe the photocopy room, here's one of the keys. I give you one physical detail. The reams of paper. You go in your memory banks, all the photocopy rooms you've ever been in, and you picture one, and you're there. That's the color of the wall you painted. Do you ever read a book and then you watch the movie and you're like, well, that's not what that looked like. They missed the mark. It's because the director's vision and your vision are different. In this case, it doesn't matter. It only matters that they picture it, not what they picture. I don't care if it's purple polka dot. You're watching it. You're there. You're going to listen to my story. Make sense? Give your neighbor a high five and say, this is good. So think of, when you're setting up your story, think of what could you see. Now, again, we're not doing this long soliloquy. We're just giving us one visual. What could you see? Auditory, what could you hear? Photocopy room. Kinesthetic, what could you feel? Maybe it's the feel of the carpet. Maybe it's the couch you're sitting on. In the tension in the contest situation, in the photocopy room, it's the warmth coming off of the photocopier. Smell, what could be in the scene? The new carpet smell, the fresh paint. Even if you don't remember, even if it's not true, remember, Hollywood, based on a true story. What I teach people in storytelling is it has to be the emotional truth, not the detailed, literal, physical truth. The actual. It's the emotional truth. The idea happened, the story happened, the lesson happened. Tell stories in dialogue. Dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. When I first handed Mark the speech, in my speech, I tell a story of going home to tell my parents I want to be a comedian. Okay? Picture that. Your kid comes home, you're unfunny, quiet, shy, naive, clumsy kid comes home and says you want to be a comedian. So in the script, when I handed it to Mark, why did he say, oh, Darren, we have some work to do? Why did he say that? What did he see? He could see this that I couldn't see after 7 years as a speaker because no one taught me to look for it. That my story went like this in the original script. My story went like this. So I went home to tell my parents I wanted to be a comedian, and they were speechless. They didn't know what to say. Well, What it turned into, if you go check it out on YouTube, was, so I went home all excited. Mom, Dad, I want to be a comedian. I was met by silence. Ouch. Same exact story. One is told in narration. One is told in dialogue. Huge difference. If I can get you to do one thing, start a story file or a story folder, but then tell your stories in dialogue. Dialogue is what makes it stickier. Dialogue is what makes it memorable. Remember the story of Costa? What did his general manager say to him? He said, I don't care if you can't speak English, work hard and you can be a manager someday. I still remember, that was 2 days ago, it was just a conversation, but I remembered it because it was dialogue. Narration is describing a past event. I went home and told my parents I wanted to be a comedian, past event. Bring it to present, witnessing the event. Mom, Dad, I want to be a comedian. They still don't get what I do, by the way. So examples from this event. So I was taking notes. What are some of the stories? John told some amazing stories. Here's some dialogue. Remember this? Wow, Mister, what happened to your hands? Dialogue. Wow, Mister, we had a speaker today. You should meet him. Dialogue. The journey story. Here's $2,000. Don't come home. Wow. Dialogue. The key lines are delivered in dialogue. Dialogue. Had anyone ever heard that journey story before? About the tooth? I never had. I was like, wow. Now I understand the song. It's cooler now. Why? Because I know the story. You're sensing a theme here. All right. Remember this one, Jack Buck. Kid, wake up. Kid, are you listening? Dialogue. These are the parts of the story. Remember, we need the other elements too. But if I can get you to do one thing to be more compelling, it's tell your stories in dialogue. Find a way to put the audience physically in the scene. When I use the photocopy room example, if you were standing there next to me, you would have, so I put you physically in the scene. How can you put someone in the scene? Your listener. You know, if you were driving in the car next to me, if you were in the seat next to me, if you're walking through the woods, find a way to put the audience into the scene. Now they have to be there. They have to visualize it. They're listening. As soon as you can, throw your characters into a conflict. As soon as you can, throw your characters into a conflict. That's why a lot of stories are boring. They don't get to the conflict. The conflict is the hook. The conflict, what happened? That gets us to want to hear what's going to happen. The challenge, the conflict is the hook. Key element that most people miss in stories too, is they don't show the emotional change in your characters. In my little 17-second story, Mom, Dad, I want to be a comedian. You saw a change in character, right? Change in emotion. If there's no emotional change in at least one character, there is no story. That's gold. Write that down if you're taking notes. If there's no emotional change in at least one character, not all of them, but at least one character, there's no story. So it may be there, maybe you got to identify it. Once you identify it, then you can tell the story better. Oh, okay, the emotion is this and it changes to this. I got some great examples for you. Here's my favorite, the one that I'm known for in the speaking world, is reactions tell the story. Reactions tell the story. So John had some great reactions throughout the conference too. Oh my gosh, no one told my dad what happened. That's a reaction to his dad walking in, loving on him. That's where the story is. In the reaction. The story lies in the reaction. So when you're telling your stories, are you showing, or how do we know what the reaction is? John's, after texting people, you love them, they text back, what's wrong? There was a reaction, and it was funny, and because it was relatable. Reactions tell the story. Jack Buck, on national radio, kid, are you having fun? And he does that on radio. Reactions tell the story, and there's a lot of humor potential there as well. Okay, so here's a 5 essential checklist, storytelling essentials. You want to tell better stories, here's your checklist. So, let them picture the setting. Give us the VAKS. Let them picture the setting. Let them see the characters. Mark Brown stands 6'2", has a heart of gold, is native of Jamaica. So I say 6'2", heart of gold, native of Jamaica. I give you a physical and an emotional about the character. But notice, I'm just doing this quick. I'm not going on and on. There's a lot I could tell you about Mark Brown. He's a mentor to me. He's sings in his church choir. He's done sermons. It doesn't matter. For this story, it doesn't matter. So let them see the characters. So I say, give us a visual and give us an emotional. Give us one visual. She always wore a red hat. He was wearing a black jacket, whatever that is for you. Let them feel the conflict. The conflict is the reason we want to hear the story. What's the insurmountable obstacle? What's the conflict? What's the member conflict? What's the team member conflict? Let them hear the dialogue. Say it in dialogue. Becomes much more powerful. Narration is past tense. Bring us to the scene. And then let them witness the change. In my opinion, the third most important one that everybody misses or doesn't understand it's important. So witness the change, meaning how did the character go from beginning to end? You may or may not know this. So let's take your movie, Kevin's movie, Back to the Future. Marty McFly. It's a nothing scene. You may not know this. You may not remember this. It doesn't matter. But in the movie telling, it's critical to the success of the movie and to you like the movie. At the beginning, we see Marty McFly at a stoplight. Somebody pulls up to the stoplight. Does anyone remember the scene or no? Somebody pulls up to a stoplight, and what do they say? Chicken. Okay? That's the beginning scene. At the end of the movie, Marty pulls up to the stoplight. He's with his girlfriend, his new smoking hot truck. Kid pulls up next to him. Drag race. Light turns green. He lets him go. He's grown because of his journey. He's different. So same situation, he reacts differently. It's kind of a nothing scene, but in storytelling, it's critical. We see that the character has changed. In fact, if you don't know this, when Hollywood celebrities read scripts are 120 pages. They read the celebrities who could do whatever movies they want. They read the first 10 pages and the last 10 pages. Because they want to see if they're going to do this movie based on if they can show the emotional shift and the change in the character. If they can't show that, they're not going to get the Emmy or Grammy or whatever E they get. That's why they choose the movie. I can effectively show the difference in the change of the character. So it's a simple idea, but if you're not aware of it, you're not going to tell stories that way. I'll give you a couple more examples to make that clearer. My big, crazy, ridiculous dream now is to take my story and turn it into a movie script. So one of my buddies, we're sitting around a table and we're at a mastermind group in Las Vegas, a bunch of speakers. And he goes, what's your big, crazy, ridiculous dream? What's your big, crazy, ridiculous dream? He gets to me and I find myself like sheepishly like sinking. I'm like, what is going on with me? What? It's just a question. And he got to me and I started hemming and hawing. I said, well, you know, I always loved true life movies and I loved the movie Rudy and I got to meet him. That was so cool. And well, what if they made a movie based on my story? I've been telling it around the world. But I really, I've always loved movies. What if they made a movie about me? But who am I to have a movie made about me? And Mike slams his hands down, gets right in my face. He goes, who are you not to? Who are you not to have your dream? I needed him to tell me. Because as a motivational speaker, how dare I be trying to inspire other people if I'm not working on my next one? So, how do you write a movie script? How do you find somebody to write a movie script? Because that's what Rudy did. By the way, Rudy actually had the movie made himself. He was inspired by Rocky, by Sylvester Stallone. He was inspired by him, and he thought he wanted to be a motivational speaker because he saw a motivational speaker. He said, well, if they made a movie out of my story, I could be a motivational speaker. Not a great marketing plan, but he did it, and he is now. Anyway, so, I lost my train of thought. All right, so we're talking about the script. Oh, so Rudy had actually hired someone, the guy who wrote Hoosiers. He literally stalked him, not even exaggerating. He stalked him. Crazy stories on how it happened. But he stalked him. He finally convinced him over and over again until he wouldn't leave him alone to create the movie or write the movie. So I'm thinking, where do I get started? Well, I live in Vegas, 4-hour drive from Hollywood. So I drive to Hollywood because I'm like, I'll go there once a month. Go check it out, network, knock on doors. I have Toastmaster friends there, so I'll go speak while I'm there, teach people and write off my trip, and then I'll knock on doors. So I'm at my very first Toastmaster little workshop there. And there's a woman there in the audience who looks vaguely familiar, but I can't place her. So I do my little talk. I get people pumped up and inspired, and somebody pulls me over. He goes, "Do you know who that is?" I said, "No." He goes, she asked me not to say, so I won't. But I'll just say she used to be an angel. And I walk up to her, just like in the comedy club. I said, "Hi, my name is Darren." She goes, "I know, Darren. I just saw your presentation." I said, "Well, I want to turn this into a movie, and how do I find somebody to write it?" And she said, "You're a great writer. You need to write this yourself." I was like, "I don't want to write a movie. I don't even know how that works." And she said, "Well, my husband and I create Hallmark movies. And I read scripts all day long, and the biggest problem with most scripts is structure, which I found fascinating because in the speaking world, most presentations stink because of structure issues." And she said, "You need to write it yourself. Go get this book." Another book. And so I did. So I'm still on that journey. It took me 7 years to write the script. Now I'm trying to sell it. But my point is about structure. The structure of a story. When I learned stories, the one thing I wasn't getting was structure. And there's a lot of models out there, but I'm going to show you the one that I created because it works for me, but none of them are wrong. This is, if you think of when I told you, when you saw the opening video of me now, you saw where I was back then when I did stitches, okay? If you saw my beginning and you see my end, what do you want to know? How? It's intrinsic. How you were then, where I am now, how? That compels people to want to know the story. So if you think about it, just like the old commercials in January for the workout, before and after. It's the same idea. Your member before and after. Your team member before and after. That's what we're talking about. We're breaking it down to the elements. By the way, I teach workshops, like 3-day workshops on this stuff. I love what I get to do for a living, and I love being here if you want to know more. But I call this the then, sorry, you're putting your camera up. Go ahead. I call this the then to now model. It's on your handout there. You look at this. This is every Hollywood movie, and this is every great story you've ever heard. I call it the then to now story model, the transformational storytelling. So if we look at the beginning, the then perspective, okay, what do the characters look like? What do the characters look like? What's their emotion? That's the then perspective. Then we get to the conflict. What happened? What was the challenge? Get to the conflict as quickly as you can. Then it gets worse. Dun, 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 dun. If the Titanic hit the iceberg, that's the conflict. The water's rising up. What if it stopped right about here? There's no story. There's no struggle. We don't care. It's not a movie. So what could be another element? So let's just say there's a member that you have a story about, and the member has this challenge. Well, what if you find out that they just found out someone in their life had cancer? That makes it worse. There's elements there, but I'm teaching you as a storyteller to start looking for those elements. What could be that gets worse? What makes it worse? And then, so that's the struggle. Then there's the revelation. That's the lesson learned. That's when the guru comes in and brings the message and delivers the message. Mark Brown says, "Oh, Darren, we have some work to do." That's when I learned the lesson that my ego was in my way. Okay, then the transformation happens. The character is different. What does it look like now? What's the emotion now? The change happened, but it happened through the struggle. This is every Hollywood movie. But I want it to be your storytelling. See some people taking notes, so I want to hang here. Hope this makes sense. It's clear, simple. And then for you and I, What's the message? What's Aesop's fable? What do we take away from this? What does your employee need to hear? What's the message they need to hear? Capture what captures you. If you're not coachable, there is no cure. I always suggest 10 words or fewer. Make your, I call it a foundational phrase, 10 words or fewer. If you can give it rhyme, that's a bonus, but it has to have rhythm. That's what makes the message stickier. The whole point you're telling the story is to deliver that message. But now they'll see it in a better way rather than you just telling them. If you just tell them, that's preaching. Notice the difference in the now and the then, that we're at a different level. Then must be relatable to the person you're telling the story to. You know, if you're trying to help them have a new perspective, they want the now. So the beginning is relatable. They want the now. They want the end result. I'll have what she's having. The Harry met Sally principle. I'll have what she's having. Hollywood script, first 10 pages. Think about it. Maybe his character has self-doubt and then confidence. Maybe a character is scared versus has joy. Maybe losing money and now many clients. Aimless. I want to hear those stories. Those are just examples. When we talk about the emotional shift, what could it be? Go back to the beginning yesterday and we talked about that. How can you say it in dialogue? Is there a way to get the scared part or the joy part or the losing money part? How could you put that in character dialogue? What could they say? Anyone remember School of Rock? A classic. Yeah. Here's what you may not remember from the scene. Maybe you remember it, maybe you don't. But I was teaching this one weekend. I was studying this. And I happened to watch it that weekend. I was like, that's a perfect example. If you don't know the story, Jack Black is a rock star in his own mind. And at the very beginning, the opening scene, we have to determine that he's horrible. So at the beginning, he's horrible and he sucks and nobody likes him. So how do we get that across? So I'm just walking you through the process. Okay, if nobody sucks, how do we show this? So there's a guy in the club saying, this band sucks, let's leave. Okay, so you see him texting that. That helps tell the story. And then he rips off his shirt and does a stage dive, except nobody's there. Nobody catches him, and he lands face plant in a bottle of rum. Okay, that's the beginning. That's establishing the character and the beginning emotion. In the end, he helps the kids. He loves the kids. The kids invite him to be up on stage and sing with him. Then he does the same stage dive, but the audience loves him now. See the difference in the characters? So yours does not have to be just dramatic, but we still have to sense it. We still have to see it. So here's some ideas for you for re-engineering yours. So re-engineer your story. Look at the structure that I gave you, the idea, the dialogue. Just take some time. I promise this process can become fun. Watch a movie and you're going to see all of these. So what if you could re-engineer the stories you already tell with the model? So look at some of your favorite stories. Say, hey, I wonder if I could make it better. Pull out the model in your notes. Maybe you could handle objections with a story. If there's a same thing that happens, same objection in your business, what if you could, is there a story that could help you handle that objection? Ask the staff to tell their story. We saw how connecting it could be. Why don't you have them, maybe at a meeting or something, have them tell their story. Give them that sheet that you got. Have them make it a team building exercise. We did it here. And then ask your staff to ask the members. If they can ask the members their stories and they listen, more of a connection happens. All right, so John O'Leary asked us, who was there for you? And I know a lot of you texted them. You got text back. This is my mom and dad. They're not doing too well right now. They live in Boston. Mom's got Alzheimer's. She's in a memory care unit. Dad is living on his own, not doing too great. I'm actually flying up there next week to help pack up their house and to be able to sell the house. So it's a tough time. But here's part of my point. They still hold hands, 67 years. It's adorable. Last year, I wrote this book called 17 Minutes to Your Dream, kind of telling the story that I told you, only what I learned from it and what I'm using now to try and sell the script. So I'm taking strategies from that. My dad almost died this year, and it was killing me because I wanted so badly just for one thing, which was for them to see the dedication in the book. Because my parents were told, when I was 35 years at home, living at home with mom and dad, my mom and dad were told to kick him out so he'll have to grow up. And they didn't. So I dedicated the book to them.
I dedicated this book to the 8-year-old dreamer inside of you, and to mom and dad who, despite telling them about my crazy, ridiculous dream, but made no logical sense, love me anyway.
If you don't know, Rudy was not I had it on that time, just saying. The battery ran out. So everyone is watching what you do. For you watching the replay, I'm sorry. I'll get you the slides. Call me. I'll fill you in. If you want to check out my workshops, if you like what I do 3-day events, virtual and live. I have a brand new book that's not even out yet. It's actually September 17th. If you give presentations, I show people how to deliver unforgettable presentations and let their story stick. I do have like 20 copies with me, advanced copies, but technically it's not out till the 13th. I thank you for making me feel so welcome. And when I'm at a convention or a conference, to meet good people, seriously, when the vendor said that, I was like, yeah, I was right. Thanks for making me feel welcome. Kevin, thank you. God bless.